You're 23 years old, with all these aspirations and hope and everything. And boom, you're hit with, you have cancer. How did you respond and what happened?
That was one, don't isolate. The second lesson was I allowed people to help me in my time of need. And they came running, prayer, food, carpools, sending me jokes, sending me videos. I got hundreds of books. I didn't even read half of them. People really cared. I didn't private. I shared my experience on a Facebook, on LinkedIn, via text with people. They cared. And that was part of my healing. I let people in and I allowed them to take help. And that's a really big lesson that I had to learn. I think that's why I'm here today. My advice to young entrepreneurs is you surround yourself with mentors. It's a discipline, Ali. This cell phone is a weapon, and you have to be able to not let it control you.
Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm your host, Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various global issues and on how we can help. Today, we bring to our dialogue Howard Brown, Silicon Valley pioneer, two-time stage 4 cancer survivor, healthcare advocate, philanthropist, author of the book Shining Brightly, mentor, speaker, and interfaith peacemaker. That's a lot. It's great to have you here, Howard. I have so much to ask you, so welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ali. I'm just Howard. All that stuff doesn't mean anything at the end of the day, but I'm just Howard.
Well, you've done a lot, so we're going to dig right into it. I want to start with cancer.
Sure.
Because after hearing your story, I know that somehow without the cancer, you may have never written the book. You may have never gone down the path that you have. So, here you are, you graduate from Babson College in Massachusetts in the Boston area, and you start working. And, you transition from your work into the .com space, which was, the place to be at the time, and Silicon Valley. And right about then, as you come out of college, as you start your work, you're 23 years old, with all these aspirations and hope and everything. And boom, you're hit with, you have cancer. A tough thing at any age, but at 23, right at the start of your life, how did you respond and what happened?
So I have to give a plug to Babson College, the number one school for entrepreneurial studies in the world. It's a small little college outside of Boston, and it changed the trajectory of my entire life because I went to a liberal arts school at first. I won't call it out, but Babson changed the way I thought about it because someone, and it was the dean of the grad school, took interest in me. I was taking summer class there, and they said, "Do you go to Babson?" And I was like, "No, I don't." They go, "You should." And they saw something within me, and I transferred into Babson and I excelled there. And I loved technology. And this was the late 80s. And so I was very, very, it was big computer companies at the time. So the IBMs of the world, Hewlett Packards of the world, NCRs of the world. And these are the, Unisys was a big one as well. And these were the companies that they brought you into big training programs. So that's how I got my start. I started in a Fortune 100 company to learn the basic skills of sales, negotiations, competition, company, product stuff, and to learn the business. And that's really where I got my start. And so I was a junior sales rep for 4 very experienced guys, and we were doing computer outsourcing at its beginning with punch cards. All right. And I was making them very productive. They were then making me a lot of money as a young guy. And I got promoted to sell a product called disaster recovery. This is really, 1988, 89. We're still no computers, no internet. And no cell phones for sure. And so we used to walk back into the office and get a pink slip while you were out. While you were out, you had a message waiting for you that someone took. You didn't have a voice recorder at the time or answering machine. So long story short is that I get promoted to drive to the company headquarters in Dayton, Ohio. And on my way out, I'm driving there, leaving my home and my family in outside of Boston, and I notice a red spot on my cheekbone. And I kind of just forget about it. But I get off the Pennsylvania Turnpike and I use a payphone. Remember those? I use a payphone to actually call my mom and dad. Yeah. And I just say, I noticed something, but it's probably nothing. My mom comes out to set up my apartment, buy me sheets and dishes, something, useful for a bachelor pad, right? And she said, that thing's getting bigger. We should get it checked out. But we didn't know any doctors there. I was only there 2 weeks in Dayton, Ohio. I happened to fly back to speak at American Bankers Association meeting, and I was speaking on disaster recovery. And you had to put a disaster plan, electronic plan together. It was a mandate, by the banking industry. You put an electronic plan together on a floppy disk. So this is telling you, this is how new it was.
Oh, yeah.
And so floppy disk, right? So I spoke about that. We gave out demonstration floppy disks and we signed up customers. And I had that red bump on my cheek. And that weekend, my dad took me to go get it checked out at a community hospital. And they just said, it's nothing. Take some antibiotics. It's a cyst or something. You'll be fine. Well, it kept growing and I didn't feel well after my speech. I kind of faked it till I made it. I did great. I went back home and my parents to have dinner. They're going to take me to the airport. But instead, we went to the hospital again. This time they took a biopsy. And then they took another biopsy. And I still kind of was like, feeling great, working out. And I had to get to the airport because I had to fly somewhere else. So the waiting game came and my parents were freaking out. They never told me this until later, but we didn't know what was going on. So I get called back to Boston. And this time I go to this community hospital. I have 7 doctors waiting for me. So something's important's going on when you have 7 doctors waiting for you. They still didn't tell me what I had because they didn't know. But they said, you have an appointment at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And I was like, what? Why would I be going to a cancer institute? They go, you have a 2:00 appointment. Don't be late. I get to this cancer hospital. It's a world-renowned research hospital for cancer and in Boston, about 45 minutes away. And the first thing I notice is that there's old people in one waiting area and pediatric little kids in the other. I'm 23 years old. Where do I belong? Do I belong with the old people or the kids? So I went and sat with the little kids and watched them eat candy and play games because I didn't know where I fit. They did a lot of tests and I get called back into this doctor who invented chemotherapy for blood cancers named George Canellis. He's probably about in his late 80s now. And my parents are behind me. I'm in an Armani suit. I mean, I'm ready to fly out to, leave. And my mom and dad are behind me. And there's this other doctor, Eric Rubin, in a white coat. He's a Harvard fellow. He's been assigned to me. So he's probably maybe 7, 8 years older than I am. So maybe he's 30, 31, 32. Okay, I'm 23 years old, 23 and a half. And they say, Howard Brown, you have stage 4 accelerated T-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You have blood cancer of your entire lymphatic system. You're relatively young and we're going to pound it out and throw the kitchen sink at it. And I didn't hear another word. I went into shutdown mode or denial or whatever you want to call it. I heard blah, 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 blah. Didn't hear another word. I look back. My mom is in tears. My dad looks like a statue. And I look up at this young guy who's sort of closer to my age. I go, what's he talking about? And they were like, we got to start chemotherapy right away. We got to do some more tests. And we left the office basically stunned because I'm an athlete. I was in great shape, but I had this thing that was growing on the side of my cheekbone. And thank God it showed up. But we didn't know what we didn't know. So we go home. I live 40 minutes away, or actually it was like 30 minutes away in the suburbs of Boston. We invite my twin sister over to dinner. My dad runs out to the library. He gets a book on cancer. We got a book on cancer. I don't know how old it was. We didn't know anything, but we were soon to actually, get a fire hose of information sent our way. And so 2 days later, I did more tests, and then I was called to do chemotherapy or do infusions. Okay, so they take the drugs and they put a needle in you and they infuse them in you, and hopefully this poison is going to kill out the malignancy and save you. Also, but it causes a lot of side effects. Well, I get to the hospital, they do a bunch of tests on me, and Dr. Rubin says, we're not doing chemo today. It's unsafe. Your liver function is too high. I was like, oh my God, I stayed up all night. I'm a nervous wreck. Okay. He says, well, we're going on a field trip. I was like, what am I in 4th grade? We're going on a field trip. Right? So we ended up going to the cryogenic center. down the street at Newton Wellesley Hospital. It's called a sperm bank, right? And I go, why am I going there? You told me that I have 6 months to live or less. I have an aggressive form. There wasn't a Dr. Google, but I read the cancer book. The cancer book said it was fatal. So I will tell you that I call that stage, analog stage, the deer in the headlights stage. I had no idea what was going on. I went to that cryogenic center. I left a sample and basically forgot about it because stuff was getting real. I went to my 5-year high school reunion bald and 135 pounds. And guys are mean, man. They're like, dead man walking, poor bastard. He's not going to make it. But here's the thing. With a blood cancer, your immune system is compromised. I spent a lot of time isolated, a lot of time alone playing Nintendo. I still was 23. I still was a kid. And I went on disability from work. Everything had to stay clean. I moved back home with mom and dad. That's what I had to do. And I lived going back and forth to Dana-Farber for treatment. And sometimes I got so sick, I had to stay overnights in the hospital or weeks at a time because I had no immune system. I was very susceptible. So I got to taste the COVID 30 years earlier than I should have, right? So that's cancer one. And nothing was working. I flew to Florida to visit my grandparents, get some warm weather, and I broke up with red patches all over my body. I got flown back, emergency flight back to Boston. I relapsed 4 times. Nothing was working. Nothing. Here's the miracle number one. My twin sister, I mentioned I have a twin sister, CJ Brown Gingras, and they typed her for bone marrow transplant. And she was an exact what's called HLA match, 10 for 10, which is an amazing, a 1 in 25,000 chance of being a match. And that was the best news I got. But I wasn't ready for what's called a bone marrow transplant or a stem cell transplant. But they got me ready. But they were pounding me with chemotherapy. And I had tons of side effects. And I did lots of blood transfusions and platelet transfusions because my white cells and my red cells and my platelets were severely compromised. And I learned a lot. And I learned a lot about my disease. I started to become active and not the deer in the headlights, but very much a collaborator and with my teams because they can't read minds. They can't tell you how they feel. So when you spend a lot of time in the cancer hospital, okay, my personality, my mom's personality, who's my main caregiver, and my dad, you get to know people. You're sitting in the waiting room forever. You're listening to their story, what's working for them, how they're dealing with side effects, what their life stories are. And the little kids, you're watching them play. And they serve a lot of candy. So when they run out of candy, my mom jumped in and got them donations of candy for like 10 years. But I started to get through go there a lot to Dana-Farber. So that was my second home away from home. And I had no idea if I was going to live. But I went in for transplant on May 17th, and they hit me up with the kitchen sink chemotherapy called the Red Devils. And I could tell you the names, but it doesn't matter. And they hit me up with full body radiation. That was the protocol. When you sign on for a bone marrow transplant, it says it could kill you. It could kill you right away. It could kill you over time. When you're taking an organ or someone else like bone marrow and putting it into somebody else, it may not work. So you sign an acknowledgement at 23 years old that it didn't work. Well, I ended up getting to the hospital, and I'm in an isolation room. Again, I'm now in a room where they're gowning up. I have no immune system. They eliminated it. And my sister came into the hospital on May 24th. And May 24th at 6 a.m, and they took an extracted bone marrow from her hips, and they put it in an infusion bag. They cleaned it up and they put it in. So at 5:44 p.m. on May 24th, how do I know that time? Because it's a time of infamy for me. They brought in a bag. Well, for those of you that are watching or listening, this is my bag of life. I actually have my infusion bag from May 24th, 1990. Because what happened is that there's 20 people in the room waiting to see if I'm going to die. Right? And then all of a sudden I'm stabilizing and they start to leave. And finally it's me and my mom. This is maybe a couple hours later. And I can't take my eyes off this bag. Is it going to work? Right? So I look up at my mom and I go, put that bag in your pocket. And she's like, no, I can't. I said, yes, you can. So she did. So I have my bag of life. Okay. So long story short, I went through and I stayed in isolation. I finally my sister's beautiful immune system grew to be my immune system. And I went into a clinical trial to strengthen my DNA and my natural killer cells for 6 months later. And then they tell you you're done. You can have your life back. I'm 135 pounds and bald. I've been through the war, right? But you can go on surveillance. You basically go get, every quarter, we want you to go get, a blood test and a gallium scan. Go live your life again. It's kind of like crazy, but no, they don't tell you there's no blueprint for survivorship. So I had to figure it out. So I went down to Florida. I stayed with my friend because I wanted warm weather. I started to rebuild myself 4 ways. This is the big lessons from Cancer 1. Emotionally, I had to repair myself. Okay. Physically, I was 135 pounds and bald. Financially and in career, I had to get that back on track. And 3, relationships. I was isolated for, those 2 years mostly. I saw people, but it was very difficult. So what I did is I moved to California. I got my job back and I moved to LA.
Okay.
So that was my situation, is that I could get warm weather. I didn't know many people. I had a job, right? And I started to actually get into a rhythm, right? So I got to play basketball. All right, basketball is my happy place. I worked out a ton. I walked on the beach. I got to know the area, right? And then I had to build up my resistance. Going to work for a full day, I wasn't ready for that. Getting up, taking the shave, drive to work, go to the office. You went to the office in those days, right? And I had to build that back up. And then also, a friend of mine actually said, I have this really great speaker series at the Jewish community in Los Angeles. There's great young people there, hot looking women. You should check it out. So I did. And you know what? Karma, I guess I was meant to live, right? I met my wife through one of these, Jewish Federation meetings, right? And I got married in 1994 overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The other component, although I learned a lot of charity from my parents, I started to actually put it in action, right? So that compassion in action that you speak so proudly about, I did it. I became a Jewish Big Brother mentor, right? We were raising money for people in need. And my wife and I were very much like-minded and aligned that way. And that's why we got married, I guess. And my job was going great. I left AT&T, bought NCR, and I left and I went to startups. I went to the .com side of things. We changed the world of broadcasting from analog to digital, grew companies big, and I was working a lot. All right. That's the one thing I was doing is I got back and I kind of became a workaholic again. That didn't get out of me. So that discipline wasn't there yet. But I got my life back. I was very blessed, very lucky, and very grateful for that. And everything was going great. And then my wife, I moved up to Silicon Valley at the time in the .com area. We'll talk about that next, but because it was crazy. But she says, we've been married for 7 years. And she knew my history. She's like, let's call for the sperm. It was 11 years frozen. So we went to in vitro fertilization doctors, and she actually grew 8 eggs, and we flew the sperm from Boston now to Silicon Valley, San Jose. And they went through a procedure called ICSI, where they defrost the sperm, take the best ones, take the eggs out, and then reharvest them into my wife. And I read a chapter in my book called The Miracle Girl, and it's our frozen kidsicle. I got a beautiful baby girl. God is good. It was great. I had a daughter. We could have had a surrogate. We could have adopted, but I got a baby girl, and it was such a blessing. So miracle 2. It was just incredible. So, but I was in Silicon Valley at a crazy time. So that was the real, part of it there. And we'll stop there for a second, but it was, all that in that was about a 3.5 year time period that happened.
Okay. Good thing we started here, because that's exactly what it is. I mean, your whole life changed because of that first bout with cancer. I mean, everything changed. Meeting your wife, all these things happened because you had to fight and win. And, there's a few things you said there that really resonate with me. I mean, you had family support through the fight, which was really important. Even in your isolation, even in those moments, you had your mom with you, you had family, your sister came to your help, important points. And then your marriage, I always tell people, find somebody who is your soulmate. Don't get married for all the reasons people are getting married for, because they don't work out, and You said the same thing here too. Talking about marriage and having parallel points in life that you were aligned to, in a sense, which was important. Now, you were an alcoholic, workaholic.
Not an alcoholic, workaholic.
Alcoholic, yeah. No, you were a workaholic. But I'm saying, no, I was saying kind of like, an addiction, like an alcoholic. You were a workaholic, which to me is an addiction because I was a workaholic too. And I quit one day and I walked away from it. And I realized until I gave away my addiction, I couldn't fix myself, in a sense. And you touched on that. And when you say you're a workaholic, some people say it proudly, and some people say it's great, but I don't believe in that. You don't believe in that either. Let's take people to now Silicon Valley years. The reason I'm going to ask you this question is I think history repeats itself quite often. And it just, different ways that we do the same thing. So during the Industrial Revolution, for example, in the early 1900s, you could have been in steel or oil or anything else, and you could have been just as much as a workaholic as you were in the dot-com eras, as today you are in the social media era. And every era has its own way of pulling you into that capitalism that drives everything about your life. And so when you speak about your years in Silicon Valley, I want to hear about how it affected you, your marriage, your health, again, your family, money, the financial aspect of being a workaholic, the goals, your personal well-being. Because for all the people watching, especially younger people who are really going, for it, and they want to make money and they want that better life financially, I want them to hear from you what really matters.
Thank you for that. So it was pretty heady times in the 90s. Okay. There's a lot of transformation going because computerization was happening. Okay. The internet, we're starting with 18, modems that were, 1800 baud, 1200 baud modems, and connectivity was just at its infancy, right? Cell phones were expensive at that time, and data plans. We were talking about pagers, right? And then Blackberries, and then those are all Palm Pilots. Those are the starting forms of communication that are so natural today that we have a smartphone that can do more than a full computer room back then. So it was pretty heady times of communications and that vehicle. And I had learned and cut my teeth back at NCR on voice, data, and video. And then at Avid, analog to digital in the broadcast world. And so I was recruited to Silicon Valley to do what I did for video, to do what I did in the audio world. But there were certain limitations still. MP3s weren't invented yet. We were talking about wave files and different algorithms. Still, the infrastructure wasn't set up for some success in some of these businesses. Okay. E-commerce was a dream. We were talking about Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. So from brochureware to some type of interactivity. Mobile didn't exist yet. So we had none of that. It was all pipe dreams of interactivity and things like that and what the future could be. Being too early, okay, it means you're a dreamer. And again, at that time, people kind of lost their sense. I say it in my book that 2 + 2 = 200 in Silicon Valley. People were getting funded for the dumbest ideas ever that had no real backing, no traction, but people were getting funded for really good ideas, okay? So, I'll give a quick story. I went to a conference and we're talking about search engines, all right? And the Google guys were just a bunch of guys. They weren't anything special yet, right? So we're sitting there. We heard pitches from some, Excite and I1 and Ask Jeeves and Alta Vista and Go Network, which became Disney and things like that. There was a bunch of them for search engines and the Google guys. And we said, yeah, those Google guys, they didn't even make a dent, right? It was like, okay, yeah. The people that made the dent were Alta Vista, backed by Digital Equipment Corporation, doesn't any longer exist. Alta Vista bought their name, the .com, for $3 million, right? And they had the biggest spider on the net. We're like, if you're betting the horse race, you're betting Alta Vista. You're not betting Google. This is 1995, 96. It was cool, but you still didn't know the outcomes yet. And I really enjoyed that. So you're at restaurants and at breakfasts, in Woodside, California, and there's deals getting done. And so it became an addiction to me. I just loved every minute about it. It's what my true technology entrepreneurship was. I was in my home. I just loved it. So when you love something, you tend to do it a lot. And I did. And I love building. It's sort of like playing like a little kid with Legos, little connection, I love building things. And so building and generating revenue on the sales and marketing side and business development side was my thing. And so I joined as VP of sales at an audio company, but we never went to market. And also I didn't enjoy the people I was working with. And I saw the rejection from the record companies and the music industry. And when you pound your head up against the wall so much, eventually you get a headache. So I go into a boardroom with Paul Allen, and Intel Ventures and Hummer Windblad Ventures, and I'd get my butt kicked all over the board because I wasn't bringing in any revenue. Well, why wasn't I bringing in any revenue? I didn't have a product. Transferable music didn't have a device like an iPod until like 8 years later, but I still got my butt kicked. So it made me work even harder. And when you're working that way, that this is the workaholicness, it takes away from something. So what's it taking away from? Family time, health, okay? Doing other things like hiking or vacationing or going into arts. And I lost my way. But lucky I had a wife there that put me back on track. And we called for that sperm donation. And I had a reason to get home for the dinner. A little better. But I wasn't perfect. It took me a long time to actually learn about work-life balance and what that means. But I wasn't executing it that way because all I wanted to do was take the company public, okay, and hit it rich and be a philanthropist and help others. I mean, that was still there, but you had to, work hard. So we were all sprinting. And what happens when you sprint? You get tired. You fall down. The best of us, okay, even the best Olympians eventually get tired. They can run 100 miles in a triathlon, but it doesn't matter. So that's what happened. And so the .com eventually corrected itself. 2 + 2 doesn't equal 200. And so what happened is that after going and getting some IPOs and not becoming this uber rich philanthropist, right? But enough to buy a huge home in Silicon Valley and to be able to start, donor advised funds and help others. That was cool. That's the victory. That was some of the fruits. But how I got there, like many, it wasn't natural. It wasn't healthy mentally, physically, for my family. And I had to learn that lesson, and I learned it by living it. And so my advice to young entrepreneurs is to not do that. And how do you do that? Is you surround yourself with mentors. So I give a talk called Mentorship is True Leadership. Okay. Why? Because if I had mentors then that actually told me to slow down, told me that what to do, and I actually would have listened to them, I might have paced myself in a different way, but I had to go through that my own way. But I didn't. I had some mentors, but nobody was corrective me by my pacing myself or telling me I was working 20 hours is too much because everyone was doing it, so it made it right. So my biggest lesson for the entrepreneurs is be a mentor and be a mentee. Because that is true leadership, because you get an outside perspective to tell you your blind spots. And we all have blind spots. And now I do that regularly now for others, and I have people doing that for me. And that's the lesson I learned in Silicon Valley. It was so much fun, but at the same time, it wasn't a natural thing. And again, I probably wouldn't do it again. That's the lesson. Yeah. If you do it again, that's the big lesson. So I'll stop there. Yeah. But it was a heady time. Really cool stuff. Google guys came out. Salesforce came out. There was a lot of LinkedIn came out of the woodwork, right? There was some cool stuff that came out of that still exists today. A lot, but I will tell you that 99% is gone. It never made it. It's done. It's gone back in the late 90s, early 2000s. It doesn't exist anymore. But those stellar supernova unicorns that made it, they made it.
Yes.
Cool did. Time.
And you know what? I hear what you're saying because I do that at work. I used to be a workaholic. And when I realized that it's not the right thing to do, when I see people doing that in work right now, I stop them. Recently I had and I call everybody a colleague. I don't say they're working at my firm or anything like that. And so I had a colleague who had a personal family event, something really gut wrenching, and they were at work. The day before this event, and it's an annual event. It's a memorial, and they were at work, and I couldn't work because I was thinking, you should be with your family today. You have this big day tomorrow. It's a heavy day for you guys. You shouldn't be here today. I appreciate that you're coming to the office. I appreciate that you're following through with work and everything else. But you know what? It can wait. One day longer, it can wait. Nothing's going to go wrong. I mean, it's bad when everybody's procrastinating, nothing's being done and everything. And then, in those very difficult days, you still have to show up because nobody's done their work the whole month or the whole year, right? But when everything's flowing smoothly, to take that one day off, to recalibrate, to be with your family, to have those relationships is so important. And I had to be the one to tell them, get off the channel. I'm not talking to you. I'm not responding. We're on Slack. I'm not responding anymore. You need to be with your family. I'm sorry. I don't care about work at this point. So I do that often with people because I find we're in this culture where there's so much expectation from work, and you're not allowed to have these relationships. People have been told to not nurture and not foster these relationships at work where everybody kind of has an understanding and a relationship with their colleagues so deep that they understand what they're going through in their lives. And I foster that. I know a lot about the people who work with me, what they've been through, their personal issues. One of the people recently spoke with me about they just they just broke up and their relationship fell apart, and they were confiding in me. So there's that kind of a relationship in the work field. And the reason I started that is the same things you went through. In my previous life, I was in the hedge fund finance game, and that is an animal on its own. And so in that space, it didn't matter. I remember I had a guy who had surgery, and when he came out of the surgery, I said, hand the phone over to, on the cell phone, I said, hand the phone over to your doctor. And I asked the doctor, when can he be at the office? I didn't ask about how the guy's doing. Nothing. When can he be at the office? And it was a day surgery. It wasn't, life-threatening, deathly, anything like that. But the point it being, like, how are you doing? None of that. When can he be at the office? So, that emotion had to change. And so now, you saying this, it really should resonate with everybody who's younger. And time doesn't wait. When you a lot of people today, they're putting the marriage aside, they're putting family aside, they're putting all those things like, I'll do that when I'm wealthy. I'll do that when I get there. I'd rather wait till I have money and buy a house to, get into a serious relationship or marriage and all those things. And I just say that's all, you're pushing everything aside just for a little more money. And the funny part is, a lot of the really wealthy people were married when they went through all of that and made their money. It wasn't like they had to be single and then they get it didn't work that way. A lot of them had family. And when you speak with them, I've spoken to many of them were my clients, and they tell me the struggles that they had to go through with their families to make it where they are. And that part people forget. People just communicate with the business side of things. Now,
it's the discipline. It's a discipline, Ali. This cell phone is a weapon, and you have to be able to not let it control you. So I tell everyone, schedule a walk, a hike, or something different. Schedule a 30 minutes after this. I'm probably going to not have my cell phone and go for a walk just to, really embrace what we talked about today. And, but schedule it in. You don't have to be and respond. This is a 24-hour thing, and life it's not natural that way. It's not healthy that way. So that's a discipline that I want to share with young people or anybody, because if you ask some of those people if they would change something, I would have spent more time with my family. I would have spent more time on my health. I would have spent more time on my, going to a museum and broadening myself. Most of them I'll have regret. Mm-hmm. Try not to have that regret. Be disciplined. Be disciplined. That's all I'm saying. Be smart.
And now you went through all of this and you were having the successful, happy life. You got your life back. You're excited. Everything's great. We're going to fast forward about a quarter century. 26 years to be exact.
That's right.
And at the age of 50, you turn 50, you're happy, you look around and you feel satisfied with your life. And you get hit with what was originally stage 3 colon cancer, which then became stage 4. And let's get into round 2, how it differed, and what happened, how to change your life.
So I left Silicon Valley in 2005 because my twin sister called me and said, I'm moving to Michigan. Well, I married a woman from Michigan, and we got the chance to bring our families back. So this is my first execution of the discipline, of not being a workaholic. I brought the family back together. And I started way before everyone else. I was running remote teams. Communications was able to do that. We didn't have Zoom, but still conference calling, and we had Skype and other things that were starting that we could do our work and accomplish and get our work done. So I moved to Michigan. It's the Midwest. It's a car town. It's not a technology town, but my family was back together. My daughter grew up with cousins and my in-laws, and my parents could come from Boston a lot quicker. And that was worth it. Also, it was a lot cheaper, a lot more affordable to live in Michigan and Silicon Valley. I will tell you that. But things are going well. I was doing a lot of community service work in the Jewish community, interfaith community, and I was running 2 platforms. The world's largest social networks are interfaith, are religion and interfaith work and things like that. And so I had platforms for that. So I was being an entrepreneur. I was being innovative. We provided online communities for ministries and churches outside the walls of a church. It was cool. It was a needed thing that did. It was a little too early. Facebook was sort of just getting going to then, outside the .com. So people were starting to get educated, but it was great. And I got funding for it. I was running a nonprofit at the same time. And I was one of the first to do online community calendaring in 2000. Way before Google Calendar. So I was innovative at the time, and we were making a difference in getting this events engine was getting volunteers and people to come to events in the Jewish community. Circle Builder was actually online communities and extending the reach of churches and ministries and nonprofits. Yeah. So I was now also taking my technology and using it for good. And it made me very happy. And it was great. So everything's going along well. I turned 50 years old. I'm playing tons of basketball. I'm in great shape, but I go get my colonoscopy. Now, colonoscopy basically is age 50 in the US, is now 45. Unless you have symptoms or family history, you can get screened at 45. That wasn't in 2016. That wasn't the case. So I make my appointment, and it's June 4th, 2016. You have to have a driver because they put you under, sedate you, and you have great sleep for 15 or 20 minutes. The night before, you do a cleanse. You got to have a clean colon, right, to take pictures and to clip anything that's there. Well, I wake up after the great sleep. My wife's holding my hand, and Lisa, she's, how are you? I was like, oh, I'm great. I look at the doctor who I actually know, and I said, Dr. Phil, everything's okay. And he said, no, I found something. About an 8.5 centimeter tumor in your cecum, which is your small and large intestine. And when I find something, it's usually bad news. Well, within days, I found out that I had stage 3B colon cancer. And they scheduled me 10 days for surgery and took 13 inches of my colon and lymph nodes and margins. And then they install a chemotherapy port inside your chest. And then you have to schedule chemotherapy. Lightning struck again. It stopped me in my tracks. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm married 22 years. I have a daughter that's, 15 years old. Am I going to see her graduate high school? Well, if you Google it, it says no. Right? So I go through the chemotherapies. If they failed me, I go through more surgery. I go through a clinical trial. And then maybe 14 months later, I get told that I'm stage 4. It's spread to my vital organ, the liver, my stomach lining, and my bowel. Now you Google that and it tells you have less than 6 months to live. So this is the digital age, though. As opposed to analog back in the 90s, there are cell phones, there are social networks, and there are support groups. And I found Colon Town and became a patient. My wife became a caregiver, and we got super smart. So we could become, again, collaborative with my oncology teams and my surgeons and my doctors to try to make the right decisions, the best decisions for us, because we were basically up against it. I was in salvaged, later rounds of chemotherapy. The side effects are brutal. And I was talking to patients, though, that were in treatment, and some of them were 5 or 10 steps ahead of me. They had gotten to what's called no evidence of disease. And I wanted to be like them. And so they became my mentors. Those were my role models, were these cancer patients that made it through, and they were going to show me the way. And so I took my own words of mentorship and became a mentee and learned from them. And then I did this crazy surgery where they cut me open from chest down to pelvis called a zipper cut. They typically do that with heart surgeries. They took out all the dead and live cancer cells, my gallbladder. They shaved my liver. They took out my stomach linings. They took out my other parts of my bladder. And then they poured hot chemotherapy so I could get absorption to kill microcell. It's fairly controversial even still today, but that's supposed to extend your life from 2 months to maybe a year. Well, I got to tell you, I am a miracle. I'm 4.5 years, no evidence of disease. I'm cancer-free right now. Now, do I have a lot of side effects like chemo brain or PTSD? Sure. Do I have chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy in my hands? Yes. Do I have digestive problems? Yes. Do I have little hearing problems? But I'm breathing.
You're alive.
I'm breathing.
Yes,
I'm alive.
you're alive.
I got to see my daughter graduate high school, college. She's a TV reporter in Montana. I put it out there now that I will walk her down the aisle at the right time. And I have a lot more to give, right? I have a lot more to give. So digital age, I didn't isolate. And the big lesson, that was one, don't isolate. The second lesson was I allowed people to help me in my time of need. And they came running, prayer, food, carpools, sending me jokes, sending me videos. I got hundreds of books. I didn't even read half of them. People really cared because I was actually, I didn't private. I shared my experience on a Facebook, on LinkedIn, via text with people. They cared. And that was part of my healing. I let people in and I allowed them to take help. And that's a really big lesson that I had to learn. I think that's why I'm here today.
Sharing.
The compassion, the gratitude, the healing, the kindness that was all given to me, right? I accepted that help. And I'm here today to pay it forward, and to be able to do that. And so, again, people ask me,
that's what got you through. The will to give, the will to say, I'm not done. I still have so much life in me, so to speak. And that's powerful because I've known cancer patients. My mom is a survivor, and I had friends. Some passed away, and I noticed they didn't have that fight in them anymore. They had just given up. They were ready. They had accepted, and they were like, "I know I'm passing away," and I think that's very important. That you fought mentally, not just through medicine, not just through the chemo, but you fought mentally. You wanted to stay alive. You had more to give, and that's something that I really take from your story. Is whenever you feel overwhelmed, know that you can challenge, know that you can rise.
So there's 3 things though that listen. If I would have been screened at age 40, okay, we wouldn't be talking right now. I would have clipped a polyp, gone on with my life, or maybe stage 1 colorectal cancer, which is potentially curable, right? So first of all, screening. So I tell everyone over the pandemic, you didn't get to go to your doctor as much. So people forgot about getting women for a mammogram or their lady doctor, or men for their prostate check or a colonoscopy, or a screening test like Cologuard, which is you poop in a cup and send it out to the lab. Go to the dentist, get your eyes checked. If you're not at optimal health, you can't be the best you. So I say screening is really important, especially for minority communities, poorer communities, indigenous communities, which actually don't get it. They don't get screened as much. The second thing is that if the cancer burden is too great, you're going to get called to heaven, and only God above knows your number when it's up. All right. My number is not up. But for those that the cancer burden becomes too great, some of them, maybe the will to live or mental toughness wasn't there, but your time is your time. And so that's sometimes what happens. But for the people that are in treatment, whether they're holistically trying to heal themselves, okay, it's a battle. You are on the front lines, emotionally, physically, financially, in relationships. Your world is collapsed, and you need others to help you. caregiver, my wife, my parents, my caregivers for Cancer One, the people that came in and supported me. Okay. And that is what we're here for. All right. Is that you lift yourself up, but then go lift up others. But others came to lift me up. And that I'm so grateful for that. I to the rest of my days, that is the big takeaway from my cancer, is that people came to me in my time of need and my family's time of need, and they lifted us up. And that's why I'm still here and doing what I'm doing.
And that led to you thinking about your life to the point that you said, you're going to write a book, because your book really has a lot of, the significant parts of your life in it, from lessons learned in childhood all the way through cancer and a lot more. So now I get, that you shared your second cancer online with your audience, and you wanted everybody to understand what you're going through. People connected, like you said, you're grateful for the way that people supported you. And you're able to do that because of technology today, obviously. And, in the world we live in, it's very easy to share, and it's very easy to connect with others and to be a part of other people's journey and help them where we can. And so when you write your book, I think it comes from that perspective of wanting to share the story so that you can give back to all the people. And one of the reasons I actually started Compassiviste Publishing, our publishing house, was so that we can publish the stories that resonate with people, and the stories that can let people know, hey, you're not alone in this. Here's a book about this. Here's someone else's story similar to yours, or even here's someone else's story so far away from what you're living that you can now gain further light about this experience. And so you write a book, Shining Brightly, which I tell everybody to read, because there's a lot of life lessons in there. And I love books like that. Even when I read fiction or whatever it may be, it's always the lesson I'm looking for in the book. It's always, what do I take from this? What can I do with this information? Because that's what it is. I mean, a book is essentially a prehistoric method of transferring data. It's taking your mind, putting it in some kind of, physical entity that you can then share with another person and say, this is my mind. And that person can read it and say, okay, I took this much from your mind because those were the things that I loved about it and I learned about it, or whatever it may be. And so you did that. And, in your book, there are two parts that really touched me. One was the hope aspect in the book, because there's a lot of hope in your book. And then I like the truths, because it's kind of like a Buddhist, that's where the interfaith comes in. Because when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, hey, this is very much kind of Buddhistic in its approach, and it's like that. So give the readers, who are going to get into your book, a little insight of what they're going to get with those two concepts.
Sure. So first of all, I was scared to write my book. My publishing friend, David Crum, was saying goodbye to me because I had stage 4 cancer and thought I was going to die. Okay. And he said, you should write a legacy book for your daughter, for your wife, something short, a Kindle thing or all that. And I was like, no. So we had breakfast and he wrote 10 chapters on a napkin, Silicon Valley style. So that was cool for me. But I went home and I told my wife, David wants me to write a book. David Crum, my publisher, my friend, my editor. And he has a publishing house. And so they laughed at me. So I called David back the next day and I said, David, I cannot write a book with you, but I can dictate a book. So I interviewed 158 of the most important, influential people in my life over Zoom during the pandemic. And I took those transcripts on Zoom that became drafts, that became chapters, that became, and for those that are actually viewing, I'm actually holding up my book, Shining Brightly. Now, the cover of Shining Brightly is my energy shining brightly through a light bulb. And in this light bulb is a dove made to look like a phoenix. I am illuminating peace, love, and hope throughout the world. So it's a deep, meaningful cover to me. Okay. And this book is a life lesson of how to live a resilient life. All right. It's my life, but it could be like your life, and how, and I make you think, and I call it homework or calls to action at the end of every chapter because I want you to take action. Okay. I love the fact that Compassiviste is compassion and activist, right? Compassion alone just sits there. Positivity can sit there. Kindness can sit there. Choose it and take action. And so my book is a book of action. Okay. You can relate to it. Okay. There's funny stuff in there. My family, we don't agree on everything. So whose grandma's brisket recipe is better? We're fighting about it on Zoom, right? It's funny. Families fight about that stuff, right? I talk about families' vacations and funny stuff that happens there with my grandparents that took us up to the Catskill Mountains from age, like 7 to 17. There's great stories in the book that you can relate to. Now, the light part of it is that, and these are the 4 truths, okay? And so everyone has light, all right? And it's very biblical, and I'm not the super most religious guy. I am very spiritual, okay? I consider all the negativity darkness, okay? War is darkness, fighting is darkness, alcoholism is darkness, workaholic, darkness, okay? We all have a light, and it's burning inside of us whether we know it or not, okay? And that light can be used for positive things, good things, survival. It depends where you're at, right? So I say we all have our own special light because that makes us individual. And what the scripture takes us is we're supposed to be in the image of God. We're supposed to be godlike. And to be godlike is there's some rules to the game. Like, okay, be thy brother and sister. I'm adding sister's keeper. Okay. That's important. Okay. Be a good neighbor. In Judaism, we call it tikkun olam, heal the world, because we live in a broken world, right? And Christianity shares it. Islam shares that same thing. The second one is that we shine more brightly when we're put together. So you know when you're actually cooking marshmallows to make s'mores, you have a little your marshmallow catches on fire. But if you put the sticks together, it shines even brighter. So if you combined with others, we shine even more brightly, right? And then with me, true resiliency, the kind that's strong enough to overcome anything that this world throws you, cancer, hardships, job loss, all the addictions, bad things that have happened to you. Okay. Impossible odds of lightning striking twice is that combination of the light is what actually can heal you and get you through. And then the last thing is that if we light these things together, you're in Dubai, I'm in Michigan, USA right now, but we're lighting a light right now. Okay. It illuminates and it celebrates our diversity, our uniqueness, and our working in strength together. We're better together. So those are the 4 truths of the book. And it sounds like it's real philosophical. I want those put into action. Those are real life things that you do to make transformational change, to be your authentic and intentional you. And those are buzzwords now, but that's what matters. And that's the most important thing that you get out of the book. And then transitioning, my last chapter of my book is sharing hope. If I didn't have hope, I wouldn't get through. That is the fuel that got me through. The hope that I would see my daughter graduate, the hope that I would actually be able to give back to the world. This is my hope. And how did I learn all that hope? My mentors, my cancer mentors, my business mentors, my family, they were the ones that stoked my light. That was the fuel that made my light shine. And so when I had the chance to get a book, I was like, I can help inspire a lot of people, motivate, educate, and inspire a lot of people. And I love that idea because then I could go speak about it because that's my true power. My superpower is being able to tell my stories in a compelling way that will call you to impact and action. And so that was the cool thing. And then the last thing is there's just true grit, right? In the cancer world, we have something called KFG. Sometimes the cards you dealt, you have to play out that hand. KFG is keep effing going because you don't have any other choice. And sometimes you got to take 2 steps back to make 5 steps forward. Sometimes you got to find a detour. Sometimes you got to go, totally in a different direction. And so that's what's called transformational change. And so this is what happens when you get knocked down. You have to get back up again, but you don't have to do it alone. Call me or you. We'll connect you with 10 people to help you get back up again. Because that's what good, compassionate people do.
Right. And honestly, I say this to people all the time. I get interviewed and people say, how did you create Compassiviste? And I say, it's not a creation. It's not a creation. Here's Howard. Here's this person. Here's that person. Here's hundreds of people who are Compassivistes. They're already Compassivistes. I'm not creating anything. I'm just trying to highlight the idea that what we're doing is we're trying to connect compassion with the action that makes compassion make that transformation, make that tangible change. And Howard's written the book or lived that life of doing this way before Compassiviste was ever an idea in Ali's head. So it's nothing new. It goes back to Moses and it goes back to Noah, but the thing is, we need to place it into action. I mean, we keep repeating this, but you just need one example. Truth or fable, Noah said, there's a flood coming. I don't want everybody to die. I want to help people. I'm going to build the ark. And so he builds the ark and, animals, humans, whatever. He saves some people. He saves some animals. And so without getting religious about it, the only way this story can then be told is because the action was taken in compassion. It wasn't just a compassionate thought. And so now, thousands of years later, here we are still contemplating, the concept of how do we put compassion into motion, into action. And I think that's the essence of what inspires me through you, is that you've actually started doing that in your own life, in your personal life, in your business life too, in your professional life. That's what you're doing now. You are putting compassion into motion. You touched on Colin Town and marginalized communities, people not getting tested often and all that. You're doing that now. You're going out there and you're helping those people do that. People should come to Colin Town, visit you online, because now you don't have to be in your town to come to that space. When you started out in tech, if you did Colin Town in Detroit, only people in Detroit really, and people who were able to get to you physically, could actually gain anything from Colin Town. Now, people globally can, come to Colin Town and say, hey, click colintown.com.org and show up. What is it? How do people get to you?
So Colin Town is a peer-to-peer community of patients and caregivers and families that have been diagnosed with colorectal cancer, which is the number one killer for men under 50 and number 2 for women. Breast cancer is still number 2. So when you get those words that you have cancer, and my friend Lee Silverstein, who passed away, says we have cancer, because it's a team sport. We want to arm you with as much education as possible to walk alongside of you. You don't do this alone, okay? The world's greatest minds come together, and they build, beautiful things and bad things, right? Okay? But you don't do it alone. And so now that I have, 4.5 years and now 2 cancers, I have some wisdom to share with you that may work for you to get through the day, to get through the week, to be able to talk to your kids, to be able to actually rebuild yourself. I call it building Humpty Dumpty, version 3.0 for me. So rebuilding yourself emotionally, physically, financially, career, and in relationships. I've walked that path and I had to do it, but I've got knocked way down. Okay. But still, we help others get back up. And that's the point. And so Colin Town is a beautiful, nonprofit NGO that helps. And there's others for other diseases and other, malaise, not just the only one. There's good causes everywhere that you can align yourself with, right? So whether it's, homelessness or feeding the hunger, or it's basically any cause is a good cause that you want to pour your heart into and help others. Cancer is certainly a big one, and it takes lives. Now, I will tell you the other thing is that you talk about lessons of learned and faith. Okay. You have to have faith, okay? Because that there is going to be be able to wake up in the morning. Sometimes it's a dark morning. I can't stop that for everyone. I had many dark mornings, okay? I got through it. And I still wake up some days and I'm like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. I'm frustrated. I'm human, okay? I repeat this mantra that we are all a work in progress. I am a work in progress. You are a work in progress. We have to give ourselves some grace and space sometimes. You get so much pressure to perform, okay? It sometimes becomes unbearable. And that's the frustrating world, the digital world that we live in, that is always talking to you and at you. So I always say, go find your happy place. Go on a hike. Go do meditation. Go do art. Go do music. Go cook. Go travel. For me, I go
play basketball in your place. Yeah.
Go play basketball, my stress-free zone. But also, basketball for me, by the way, is not just a stress-free zone. I play with interfaith guys. I live in a community here of Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Jews, African American. Doesn't matter. We all play together. We shoot baskets. We don't shoot each other. Okay, we live in harmony. So if I can do that on the basketball court, we can show the rest of the world that you can actually work and play with others that aren't like you. Okay. And who did that first? Father Abraham and Sarah did that first. They welcomed the stranger into their tent. Okay. Why do you want to welcome a stranger into your tent? Because they have things to offer you. They have culture. They have different foods, different history, and it makes this world great. And the most frustrating thing for me today, Ali, is that there's ignorance out there. We are living in a world where you can choose hate. You can choose hate. You're not born with it. Your words and your actions conduct hate. And it's very frustrating to a guy like me that wants to be welcoming to see this world in today where there's hatred, there's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, bigotry. Okay. That's not how we were born. You come out of the womb very pure and you have to learn it or be taught to you. And I say this, that my interfaith work is the hardest work I've ever done in my whole life now. Okay. Battling cancer is really hard. Changing people's minds and the way that they operate, okay, and attitudes. This is hard work, and this is why you and I, and we've only recently met, a couple months ago, is that Compassiviste takes that into account. Okay, we all don't always live in harmony, but we can do better than we're doing now. We can do so much better than we are doing in today's societies. What's happening on college campuses for young people and happening in the world and the wars. I can't stop a war. You can't stop a war. But we can actually do our part in our little neighborhood, in our communities. And sometimes, like you, have a massive global vision. All right. I have a massive global vision of shining brightly. That's why we're joining teams and aligned with each other to be a better, stronger team. But right now, I'm very disappointed about the amount of I just call it pure hate. It's hate of another human, and that's not how we're supposed to be here. And maybe I'm Pollyanna about it, but I think we can fix it. Okay,
we can definitely. You know what? And I think a lot of it has to do with the misinformation, the disinformation, which is a little worse than that, and the lack of education and the ignorance that goes around. And then there's a lot of social issues that add into it, and that's why, like you said, Compassiviste exists. We want to tackle these. When you say we can't stop a war, we can stop a war because we are the ones who participate in war. Governments are not these secluded entities with their own life forms that they take to war. It's humans they take to war. I mean, we go back to Muhammad Ali, and he said, "I'm not going."
Yep.
I'll lose. I'll stop boxing. I'll go to jail. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. But I'm not going. Now imagine the idea of Compassiviste is, I see you, Muhammad Ali. I see you. I hear you. Now the catch is, I have to make 100 million people do that. Because when 100 million soldiers say, I'm going to be Ali and I'm not going to go to war, there is no war. I don't care how many drones you have. Somebody needs to operate it. Some human needs to participate in it. And if we can get the majority to say no, that's when we all shine brightly. And that's where you come in. That's where the shine brightly comes in, because that's when the light comes in. The light comes in when the collective becomes so powerful that it overwhelms the voices of danger and darkness, as you put it.
I think there's so much learning to do from a Martin Luther King, from a Gandhi, from a Mother Teresa, from these leaders that had great world touch. Just get a piece of their light, learn a little bit about what they do, and then take it in as your own. And so what happened to me, and this is really important, is that I think that the education system, needs to change. So what I learned as a 5-year-old boy from my Orthodox Jewish grandmother who came from Russia or Lithuania or Poland or Ukraine as a 16-year-old girl to this country with nothing. She took us by the hand, me and my sister. I remember walking on the Sabbath. And I found, this is chapter 1 of my book, by the way. I found a quarter and I was so happy to buy candy. And she's like, no, that quarter is not yours. that quarter is God's money, and it goes into, we call it a Jewish piggy bank, a tzedakah box. It's a giving box. And that box is for others in need. That is not for you to buy candy. Okay. And so my daughter has multiple piggy banks growing up. One for the money she would give to others and have to make the decision of who to help, and one for her candy money. And so that's the decision. So my chapter 1 of my book is about my grandmother teaching me values. Okay. And so the value of choosing kindness. She never said just be kind, choose kindness, take the action of being kind. Okay. She said, choose to be giving. Okay. Show me how you're a giving person. Choose healing the world and healing yourself, being a better person. Choose to do that, right? She goes, choosing gratitude and forgiveness, and choose not to hate. That's chapter 1 of my book. So that's a memoir of how I was formed, my values, and how did I carry them forward in life, and how did I carry them forward now? Now is the time, after 2 cancers, where I'm actually really showing my values. This is how I want my legacy, and I live it. I'm not just leaving it. I'm living my legacy every single day. I wake up every day and say, I am blessed. I am grateful. I am thankful. Okay. And I am lucky to be alive. And who can I help today? That's my day. That's compassionate. That's Compassiviste.
Yeah.
That's shining brightly every single day. And my great grandmother knew that. Everybody actually knows that. It's whether they actually realize it and they value it, and then do something about it.
And that's elder's wisdom for you. You know,
elder
like
wisdom.
I said, you know, it's all there. We just have to act upon it. Like you said, we just have to choose to do that. And I always say, when you look at the mind, you know, it's a modular system. You know, imagine, you know, the two of us go into a shoe store and we're looking to buy a pair of shoes, and you know, we bargain to get a better price, for example. And you have your economic hat on. You know, you're bargaining. You have your economic hat on. And so now, if you had your compassion hat on before you start bargaining, you think to yourself, okay, you know, this salesperson, or you know, this independent shoe store, if I were to bargain, would it really affect their economic situation? If they don't make enough profit from this, can they pay rent? Can they pay the employees? There's so many discussions to be had. The same thing with this, you know, store owner. You could say, hey, look, I really bought the shoe at $30. I'm trying to sell it at $50, and really 45 of those $50 go towards upkeeping this store. And I'm only keeping $5. So I can't really give you that much more of a discount, because then I can't survive. So there's this communication that happens if the compassion module's on. But the compassion module is never on almost. There's always some other module on. There's always a competitive module, I don't know, fight or flight module. There's so many different modules on that are based in that darkness that, you know, you don't get the opportunity to maintain a whole day completely in a compassionate mode. And that's what I challenge people. I tell them, go a day and make all the decisions. Like you're driving, let that person who's cutting in through. Whatever you're doing, someone, you know, the worst case scenario, you're waiting at, you know, Starbucks to get your coffee, and it's, you know, a long line, and someone butts in. Don't mind it. Whatever it is, just let it be. Be fully compassionate. See what happens at the end of that day. See how much your day changed. See how much you lost by not fighting back. And then if you realize you really haven't lost anything, start to change your life. Start to raise that compassion module to the point that, you know, it's not killing you. I mean, it's not, don't be Jesus Christ. Don't go and get crucified for it. But I'm just saying, try your best to get that compassion system in your head so that you can choose that, like your great grandmother says, right? You need to be able to choose that. You can't just think about it, or, you know, see it on your social media and say, oh, and, you know, a like or a comment or something, and go on with your life like nothing happened. And that's what's important. Howard, thank you very much for speaking on Compassiviste Dialogue, for sharing your amazing insights and the resilient life you've lived, and for turning to this huge giving perspective in the concept of shining brightly. I want you to leave everyone with a piece of wisdom. What would you tell people to take away from listening to you here today.
So the first thing is, for those that are watching or listening, I'm putting on my white sparkling sunglasses because I'm shining brightly back to you, Ali, because Compassiviste is a movement. It's a global umbrella that you're setting up. And all you're asking is to come join. You're not asking much. You're saying, come join me in this crusade, this effort. And I'm doing the same. And I love that. And I'm so excited for the future of Compassiviste, and that I'm, hooking up Shining Brightly right to the right to it, because it's part of it, and I love it. And so I'm so glad that God has put you in my life, first of all. So I want to say thank you to you. But I want to actually just end by saying that we actually can just choose to shine brightly just a little bit. Okay. And you even spoke of that, right? Let someone in, buy them a cup of coffee, and don't tell them. Random act of kindness. Choose to do that, right? So if we actually choose to shine brightly for ourselves, take care of at home, take care of your emotions, your health, your finances, and your relationships, okay, as best as you can, and then go help others, lift them up, lift up others in your neighborhood, in your local community. And now with the digital world, you can help someone in Dubai and Michigan at the same time. Mm-hmm. The world will become a better place. And that is good for the world. It's good for humanity. So keep shining brightly. That's my wisdom. Shine brightly.
Thank you, Howard. And every time I put on, or anybody puts on, a pair of shades now, they are going to remember Shining Brightly in Howard Brown. I encourage everyone to visit your nonprofit, especially people in the marginalized communities, because you really opened that topic up for me as well, and we're going to collaborate on that to bring this idea to Compassiviste Foundation to support more people from marginalized communities to be able to reach out, get tested, go through the processes they need to, so that they're healthier, and they may not be able to afford it. So we're going to try to put a program together between Compassiviste Foundation and Howard Brown and all of his entities, Colin Town, Shining Brightly, to be able to bring this to more people who really need it, because every human should have access to this. Every human should have access to healthcare in this way. And what you're doing is noble in that sense. So please visit his nonprofit, Colin Town, and visit his website, shiningbrightly.com. Read the book, and connect, reach out to Howard, connect with Howard. He's there. He's waiting for people to connect with him. So, he's giving back, and this is the time to get mentored, to get advice, to share. So please do that, and subscribe to Compassiviste podcast so that we can bring you more stories just like Howard's, and share Howard's story, share this episode, let the world know about people who are shining brightly. All the links will be listed below, so you can click there and go and see all the things you need to see. We're here to help change the world together. I'm Ali Horia. Thank you, Howard.